And thanks to all of you who have joined our Leading Supply Chain Innovation webinar series. The Plug and Play team is excited to partner with the University of Arkansas SCMRC to bring this webinar series that will combine industry experts, academic research, and innovative startup technology. I know that some of you may not be familiar with Plug and Play, so I'll provide a brief overview of the organization and specifically what we are doing here in the Northwest Arkansas region. Plug and Play was started in the late 1990s by our founder and CEO, Saeed Amidi, who at the time was an entrepreneur and real estate investor. One of the investments in Saeed's portfolio is what we now call the Lucky Building, which is located on University Avenue in Palo Alto. And it's in this Lucky Building where several well-known companies began as startups. Companies that you've all heard of, like Google, Logitech, PayPal, Danger, which actually led to the popular Android platform. And this is where Saeed became an early technology investor and provided the idea to expand into venture capital. Fast forward to today, we're now known as one of the most active VCs globally. Plug and Play has made over 1,000 investments, 10 of which have actually become unicorns. And unicorns are known in the industry as companies that are valued at or above $1 billion. Here you can see some of the examples of investments that Plug and Play has made. Well-known companies like PayPal, Lending Club, Dropbox, and actually most recently you can see here Honey, which was just acquired last year by PayPal for $4 billion. In addition to venture capital, Plug and Play has developed a large innovation platform that includes a startup accelerator and corporate innovation platform. Plug and Play's goal is to get technology to market faster, and we do this through a couple different ways. First is our startup accelerator, which provides resources to help new organizations develop by connecting them to our industry experts within the Plug and Play ecosystem. We also help these startups get introduced to larger corporations. And we do this through our corporate innovation platform, connecting our corporate partners with startups and helping our partners develop their internal innovation programs. We currently have over 400 corporate partners globally engaged in our innovation platform. And through this corporate innovation platform, Plug and Play is connecting startups to many Fortune 500 companies like Daimler, P&G, Coca-Cola, Red Bull, Samsung, just to name a few. Many of these corporations have a global footprint, and Plug and Play has expanded its network to support these global partners. Our corporate partner network spans across 18 different verticals throughout different programs all over the world. Here you can see our global reach, and our mission is to make innovation open to anyone, anywhere. And we've expanded our network beyond just Silicon Valley, and this allows Plug and Play to connect with new technology ventures no matter where they're located. And you can see we have locations on 5 continents and several offices throughout the US, Europe, and Asia as we expand into other regions. We leverage our global network to source startups and share innovation between teams around the globe. And an important part of the Plug and Play network is our Northwest Arkansas office. This footprint allows for us to target regional expertise in specific areas. Northwest Arkansas was attractive for the Plug and Play team for multiple reasons, one of which is the history of innovation and entrepreneurship. Companies like Walmart, Tyson, and J.B. Hunt were founded by entrepreneurs. And there's many community partners here also supporting growth, like the AEDC, Walton Family Foundation, University of Arkansas, and the Northwest Arkansas Council. We have also added other corporate partners like Georgia Pacific and Crowley Maritime. There's also a large CPG and supplier community that can connect and collaborate around technology innovation. And over the past year, we have actually introduced 25 startup companies to the Northwest Arkansas ecosystem with the goal of increasing that to over 100 per year. The Plug and Play Northwest Arkansas office is currently focused on bringing innovative technology solutions in the supply chain industry to Northwest Arkansas region. And we are currently in the middle of our Batch 2 program with 13 startups participating, many of which have joined us for this webinar today. We are excited about supply chain for a number of reasons. First is the increase in investment deal count activity. From 62 in 2009 to 342 in 2019, as you can see on this graph. We believe this is going to accelerate in the post-COVID era, as most companies are increasing their focus on supply chain reliability, safety, and many other areas. Another reason we're excited about supply chain innovation is its relevance to corporate partners. The supply chain vertical has over 40 corporate partners globally and has developed a corporate network that can map out the end-to-end supply chain, from sourcing to manufacturing to retail. And the second row displays a vast transportation and logistics companies that are part of the Plug and Play network and connect the end-to-end supply chain. We're hearing that our corporate partners are excited about a few of the following technology areas. Here you can see some of the hot topics in the industry. You know, our webinars are focused around this, as well as our deep dive sessions. You can see last mile delivery, AI and predictive analytics. And to give you a sense of how we organize our startups, here you can see kind of a further look at technology areas with the simple list of startups that are a part of the Plug and Play ecosystem. You can see startups in IoT, safety tech, and last mile. Under the last mile category here are the 4 startups that are part of the webinar today: IonRide, Loginext, KiwiBot, and Frog Labs. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Daniel. Thanks.
Great. So I'd like to welcome our panelists up to the virtual stage, and while they get their mics turned on and we get the stage set up and they get their cameras turned on, I'll provide a brief introduction of each one of the panelists. So we have joining us from J.B. Hunt, Nick Hobbs. He's the president of Dedicated Contract Services and Final Mile Services. We also have David Guggina. David's with Walmart and is currently the Senior Vice President of Supply Chain Product and Engineering. And finally, we have Dr. Brent Williams. He's the Associate Dean of Executive Education and Outreach at the Walton College of Business in the University of Arkansas. So I'm going to turn this over to each one of them to provide a little bit more of the introduction and provide some opening comments on this last mile delivery topic. So Nick, why don't you go ahead and kick it off?
All right, very good. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. We're excited about what's going on in Final Mile. It's a strategic initiative here at J.B. Hunt, one of 2 big ones we have going on. And so what we focus on is the big and bulky. 2-person delivery currently is our focus. In-home, we do assembly, we do connection. And so that's a niche that we're really zeroing in on. It's a very fragmented industry. And so we're looking to bring scale in. There's probably 3 or 4 other competitors in it. It's XPO, Ryder, and really Forward Air. And those have kind of come together along with ourselves through acquisition. So you see some acquisitions trying to come together to build scale, to bring technology and innovation that's going to further differentiate us. So this is a new initiative for us. We haven't done any acquisitions over 30 years other than in Final Mile. So this is a big future for us. And so we're excited about all the startups that may come to help us enable and differentiate ourselves as we move forward in this key segment.
Great. Thank you, Nick. I'll turn it over to David now.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Guggina. I'm the Senior Vice President of Product and Engineering with Walmart, within Walmart Supply Chain. My entire background is in operations and supply chain. My first role in supply chain was an intern at General Motors on a trim line. Went on to work in Anheuser-Busch, Amazon, and for the last 2.5 years, I've been working with Walmart. Initially, I was on the e-commerce side, and when we pulled supply chain together to build the omni-channel team, I took over leading product and engineering for both sides of the house. Really, you know, when I think about last mile, I think about the factors that are at play that we're dealing with in the environment today, and that's That's the growth of the popularity in pickup and home delivery. The evolving customer preferences for getting things more quickly to their doorstep or into the back of their vehicle without having to necessarily go into a store, wanting more selection and wanting to interact with us in a more digital manner. And I think another key factor at play is just the advancement within technology. So Nick mentioned the startups that we work with through Plug and Play, but there's just so much technology and advancements that we're seeing, and it's an incredibly exciting space to be in at this time, as all three of these things converge around the popularity of shopping through digital, the evolving preferences in customers, and technology. So really excited to talk with you all today about those things.
All right, thank you, Dave, for those opening remarks. And last but certainly not least, I'll turn it over to Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Greg, and certainly my pleasure to be here with you today. As Greg said, I'm one of the associate deans in the Sam M. Walton College of Business, but also a professor in supply chain management, and particularly excited about Final Mile, really from a research standpoint. It's certainly a wide open field for us as researchers. I've done a little bit of research in this area, but I really think as new scholars are emerging in our field, this is a place where they're going to find that there's lots of unanswered questions and lots of ways that research can actually help practice and help advance practice. And that's what I'm so excited about. So thank you, Greg.
Great. Thank you for those opening remarks to our panelists. So, and just a reminder to the audience, you can participate in this panel too. You can ask questions through the Q&A part of the Zoom app. Feel free to fire questions away at us, and I'll ask as many as I can to our panelists. So to kick it off, I want to start off with you, Nick. And as you mentioned in your opening, you're focused on growing your final mile services. And I know these are different from some of the core services that J.B. Hunt traditionally provides. Can you talk to us about some of the innovation you've had to implement as you've had to transport product to the end consumer versus the traditional brick and mortar model, which would take it to a distribution center or a retail outlet?
Yeah, well, most recently, to start with the most recent, because of COVID, we had to quickly adapt, and we wanted to do touchless deliveries. PODs that you didn't have to touch. So previously you had to sign the app. And so a lot of customers didn't want to touch our app. So we had to pivot real quick and just on the spot through an app, be able to get touchless so that we could email it quickly to their end consumer. So we had to do a lot of programming and a lot of technology to go back to our customer, but to the end consumer and make those connections to do that. So we did that in about a 3-week period real quick. So that was a huge success if you think about during COVID of how to go in the house and maintain your space with PPE and still do that. So that's one thing. The other things that we've done is really optimization and juggling the price and the time that the consumer wants it. So everybody wants it at 8 a.m., but that's very expensive if everybody gets a delivery at 8 a.m. But if you can optimize and figure out the trade-off of how do I incent someone to do the afternoon or early evening and optimize the less miles per stop. So optimization is really and we worked with the U of A on this, is really driving a lot of things and a lot of research from a consumer standpoint on if I give more flexibility, that's not as convenient for the end consumer, but it's much more efficient on the price. So each of our customers have a different trade-off. And so trying to drive innovation and giving options and predictions on that is a big focus of ours to give a great experience in home.
Great. I'd love to get Brent's comments around the route optimization, because I know he's done some research, and you mentioned that, Nick, too, so you might have worked with Brent directly. So I'd love to get his comments around some of the research he's done around route optimization.
Yeah, Greg, happy to comment on that. This is there's some work that I've done with colleagues at other universities Bill Rose, who's at Iowa State, Chad Autry at University of Tennessee, and Diane Mollenkopf, who's at the University of Canterbury in New Zealand. And we really got interested a couple of years ago in understanding the diversity of the urban environments and how that intersects with vehicle routing decisions. I actually think, I think what we learned says that there's really a lot of wide open space for technology to still solve a lot of those vehicle routing challenges, particularly as it relates to final mile. You know, what we found, and this is no surprise to anyone, we all know that our country and our world has urbanized. I think one source that I saw, you know, says roughly 80% of the U.S. population is living in an urban area. But I think what's particularly interesting about that is about 1/3 of those 80% lives in the top 10 most populous cities, right? But we all know that those cities aren't homogenous, right? And there's vast differences in the way that they've built, the way they've grown, the geography around them. So our research was really looking at the differences amongst those. What we created some typologies around the different types of cities, at least in the U.S., and tried to understand how routers were applying unique knowledge of those areas to the vehicle routing decisions. And I think that's actually, Greg, what opens up the real opportunity, at least in that specific aspect of final mile, for startups and for innovation to occur.
Great, thanks, Brent. And so we have some good questions coming in on this topic from the audience. So, and this is actually appropriate for Nick and David, so I'll turn it over to them. But one of the questions is, how do you manage the trade-off to meeting that customer instant gratification, which they expect, and the instant delivery with the cost and managing cost on your side? So if you can comment a little bit on that. David, I'll let you go first on that one.
Great. So I think the questionnaire hit the nail on the head with respects to shorter duration of ship speed for customers means a more intensive first touch within the supply chain. And let me explain what I mean by that. Think about the world where it's a 2-day delivery. Your initial, more people are getting 2-day deliveries than same day or next day deliveries. So your initial pick of the item, whether you're in a store or an FC, the pick path is more dense, right? And then you put it into the back of, let's say, a FedEx trailer, where that then goes to a sortation hub. So loading that trailer, it's a more dense trailer. But in the world where we're having to deliver more quickly, that initial pick is less dense because you have less volume. That first sort, you have to drive further to get closer to the customer so that you can inject and deliver more quickly. And it's just, it's a more intense first touch. So, you know, how we think about solving this problem is really better utilizing the assets that we have as an organization. You've seen Walmart leaning more heavily into utilizing more and more stores. Our stores are within 10 miles of 90% of the population. We went last year from having about 1,400 stores that were doing grocery delivery to this year we'll have closer to 2,400 stores that are delivering groceries to customer. And in addition to groceries, we're now appending the most popular general merchandise items. So we're getting, Walmart's done a fantastic job over the years of figuring out what items customers want. What is that true head with respects to the head SKUs that drive the most demand? And we're now able to service customers more quickly by utilizing those assets. And that's been an area that we've really leaned in to reduce the intensity of that first touch.
And I'll just say each of our customers have a different view on how they want to solve that. And the big and bulky side, it's all about having visibility to the inventory. So the Walmarts or the Whirlpools or the Home Depot or Lowe's, they have to have visibility of where that inventory is when the customer either purchases it online or goes into the store to buy it. The more sophisticated they are, as soon as they buy it at the point of sale, you have the ability to select your delivery time based on slots that we work with on how many slots we have available. and we have to estimate, because if we're installing a dishwasher, it may take 2 hours. If we're installing a refrigerator with a water line, it's a 30-minute stop. And so we have to have all those engineering requirements put into that routing optimization so that you don't overschedule to give a great delivery. Then it's about window times, and everybody views that differently. Is it a 2-hour window, a 4-hour, a 6-hour? And the wider you make it, the more efficient it is, the less cost, but the less convenient it is. And so everyone has a different opinion on how they want to do it. So we have to customize for each customer. And then we try to get consumer sentiment and feedback on how that works. And so everybody has a different view. So that's just a lot of what we look at on a daily basis. A lot of forward planning for peaks and holidays and all of that in the big and bulky side as well.
Yeah, thanks, David and Nick, on those comments. Nick, one follow-up question for you on that. So you mentioned the delivery window and the convenience of 1 hour, 2 hour, 4 hours, 6 hours. It reminds you of the old days when you had the cable guy come and they give you like a 8-hour window,
Exactly.
which is always inconvenient for a lot of us. So yeah, I was happy to see those windows are down. Are you looking to optimize pricing around those delivery windows to meet those customer expectations?
We've talked with customers about that, but we're really, as an industry in this final mile, not sophisticated enough to really understand how to price that and do that. But it could be a green option that if you're more wide open and drive miles out, that will give you less savings. Or you could say, here's free delivery and there's a premium up here, or here's a basic $50 delivery. And if you want it narrowed down, there's $10, $15 extra for that. So again, we're agnostic to that. We can talk about the cost based on the density and the forecasting to show what it would cost extra. And then it's up to the retailers really to decide how they want to market that to the consumer. And so we serve up those ideas and let them make the decision, because each of them has a different play and a different price point. And a lot of it is dependent upon the price point of the product. If it's higher end, they'll go a very specific time. We're not as efficient. A consumer's fine with that. Think of a Peloton bike or something like that, a high-end refrigerator. But if you get down to basic furniture, they want just the lowest cost. And so you need more time on that. So each retailer is different and each industry is different that we serve.
That's great. Thanks, Nick. So yeah, we have a lot of great audience questions coming in. So this next one, David, I'll start off with you. And Walmart just announced a great quarter. You guys had, I think it was 71 or 73% year-over-year growth in e-commerce sales. And I know having to manage supply on earlier in my career, and you managing the supply chain on your side, that's sometimes a nerve-wracking experience. So can you talk to us about some of the infrastructure changes that you've had to make? And then can you also comment on what's your viewpoint of inventory levels now, having gone through that tremendous growth period?
Yeah, absolutely. So with regards to infrastructure changes, we saw a surge of demand that was really hard to rival. It was a sustained peak period, and it continues to sustain with respects to just customer demand for e-commerce deliveries. It was an incredible increase. It was 74% growth year over year, and we had to immediately figure out how do we increase our processing capacity so that we can keep our promise to our customers with respect to days to delivery, expected delivery date, in a window that is acceptable, an acceptable service level. So it forced us to innovate at a speed that I had not seen before. And it also made us think about how do we not only use fulfillment centers that service customers, how do we better utilize our DCs? How do we better utilize our stores? And how do we drive a truly intra-connected supply chain? And Greg, that's really going to be our focus moving forward as well. How do we think about harmonizing data between all of the different pieces of our supply chain so that we can continuously learn and optimize? This includes looking at our warehouse management systems, our labor management systems, our warehouse control systems, our transportation optimization. How do they work together to deliver a phenomenal customer experience? We're also thinking about how do we better become more connected with our partners, right? With respects to the vendors that are sending us product, or the CCOB carriers that we're using to deliver goods and forward deploy goods to stores that are then bringing those goods to the last mile to customers. And then lastly, we're really thinking a lot about how do we better utilize automation, and when do we utilize automation rather than having a human make a decision, potentially using automation to either make a decision if it's software related or conduct certain work. With respects to getting back in stock, that part of your question, we obviously saw a spike in demand for certain goods that we didn't expect, hand sanitizer, paper products. What I can say is that Walmart's phenomenal relationships with our vendors and the trust and that we've built over time allowed us to partner incredibly closely and get back in stock as quickly as possible. Mind you, that's still something that we're currently we're working on continuing to bridge those gaps, but the team's done a phenomenal job of connecting with our partners on that side and getting back in stock so that we can better service customers.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate how challenging that is too, because you've seen products like baking products where all of a sudden you receive a surge in demand where usually it's a low period for baking. So
you couldn't find flour for a while there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And Betty Crock right here is like a brand that's been resurrected since this pandemic. So good news for the General Mills folks. So follow-up question from the audience on this, and you mentioned a little bit about it, but maybe you can go to a little bit more detail, David, on what type of AI are you using and software are you using to help optimize and automate some of the last mile delivery processes and connect some of those systems together.
Yeah, so let me talk a little bit about just inventory in general, because one key piece about last mile is you've got to deliver the right items to customers, and you got to know when you can promise items to customers. And I'll get to the AI point here in a second, but we are continually trying to improve the accuracy of our inventory within our supply chain. And we think about end-to-end inventory really in three buckets. You've got your item data quality, right? And how accurate, that's the accuracy of all the attributes that matter to the business. And there's work that we do with our vendors to populate that. There's also work that we do utilizing technology to populate that information. Then we've got our item accuracy and location, really knowing where your inventory is. And then if you know the items that you have, you know where they are, then you can know when you can promise them to your customers, particularly for fast delivery from stores, for example, where we then engage our either our own Spark delivery units or crowdsourcing to then bridge that final gap. One area where we're using AI today, kind of in that spectrum, which is all intra-connected, is on the attribute collection to make sure that we're ultimately delivering, putting the right item into the courier and or our driver's car to deliver in the last mile. And we're partnering with a group of different companies that are making some really great advances in vision technology and utilizing deep learning to collect unstructured images and then give us data that's useful for us with respects to what type of item are we handling? Do we need to treat it differently because it's more fragile or it's a hazmat item? What's the size of the item? What's the weight of the item? Giving us 3D cloud point imaging so that we can package it better. That's been a really interesting piece of work that that I literally was just diving into earlier this week with the team and seeing a progress update on that, that we've got some really great partners in the AI space.
Great. Thank you, David. Any follow-on comments on the AI space from Brent or Nick?
No, I would say in this big and bulky space, we're still probably a year or two away. The density and the forecasting that we're really needing, AI on the consumer demand side is not quite sophisticated coming out of the stores. So we're really not using it in this side of the business. We use it a lot over in the digital freight marketplace is where we use a lot of the AI over there. But in our final mile, we do not use a lot.
Great. Well, good news for you, Nick. A question just came in from the audience that's probably targeted more towards your business. And it's around the size of equipment you see the trend moving towards. Do you see it moving towards more smaller, nimble type equipment? Or do you see the trend, like, are you still going to try to drive those 53-footers everywhere and try to make them as efficient as possible?
No, we run about 600 26-foot straight trucks in final mile. We run very few tractor trailers in final mile. But also we run roughly about 1,400 contractors that run 26-foot straight trucks. So that's the predominance of what we run in the big and bulky. But I do see that even going from there could be crowdsourcing for pickup trucks where we have one-off delivery. So you use the density for the 26-foot straight truck, and then you use crowdsourcing for the extra 1-2 pieces. Some of those things, or maybe to the more outlying area. So I think a combination it is the most efficient and best service is if we could do some crowdsourcing along with some just outside the network type stuff. So, but I think 26 is the right thing for big and bulky because we can basically cube that out and get anywhere from 12 to 17 stops in there. Depends on what the product mix is in a day. And that's about what we can have in the big and bulky and get done. Depends on density and traffic, but that's a pretty close rule of thumb.
Greg, if I could add off that, it's a great question. We're also looking deeply at the different class of vehicles that we utilize, depending on how we're going to service the customer. So, for example, for fast delivery, we found that crowdsourcing works very well, right? So you're talking about your class 1, your class 2, class 3 vehicles. For next day and 2-day delivery, you can if you're forward deploying inventory, you probably lean more heavily into your Sprinter vans, your class 4, class 5 vehicles, because they can handle the 50 to 120 packages that you would need to densify a route and justify delivering those goods. And then obviously Walmart's a big player in the class 9, class 8 space, just moving our freight to those points, to our stores that then deliver to our customers. So it's a really interesting space. And then you get into the whole piece of alternative fuel types and where that actually makes sense, and the payback for the different class of vehicles.
Sure. Yeah, is there anything that you're looking at from a vehicle automation standpoint too? So autonomous vehicles in that space. Can you comment around that one?
Yeah, so we have a few partnerships that we partner with on the class 1, 2, 3 for autonomous vehicle delivery. We've got some work that we're doing with respects to yard trucks and utilizing autonomy in that space as well. And then the over-the-road piece, I would say, is really still in its infancy. It's something that we've got some partners on that we definitely speak with, but I would say that there's still a lot of work to do in that space.
Great.
Yeah, I would just say we probably the same partners on over the road we partner with and test and go through that. I would say on the straight trucks, I would say we're doing more on the electric side than the autonomous. keep in mind, I'm big and bulky, and you got to figure out how to get that product in the home and stuff like that. So the autonomous probably doesn't fit for us in this segment, but the electric seems to be catching a gear, and we're doing 2 or 3 different tests on straight trucks, and really liking what we're seeing early on some of the electric vehicles.
Great, thank you guys. And Brent, I want to go back to this conversation about the size of vehicle and optimizing the route around it. I don't know if you've done any research or you have any comments around it, because I know that you've looked into the space quite a bit.
Yeah, I haven't specifically looked at the intersection between the diversity of the urban areas and the type of vehicle used, but I think that it's probably correlated to what we have, you know. So we were looking at how equipment and drivers were used in those different areas, but it became clear really quickly that the strategies that they were utilizing were quite different. You know, whether they were utilizing boundary consistency as their very first go-to as they were building the routes, or other things. And so I believe that, you know, just from an optimal standpoint, if you're only looking at optimizing that given route, now that doesn't look across the whole fleet. I think there'll be some certain differences between, hey, if it's a single core, or if it's a sprawled urban environment, or if there's multiple nodes, if you will, population density, that as final mile continues to grow and gets even more sophisticated, I think that will happen.
Sure. Great. So we're about out of time. This has been a fun panel, and the time went by quickly. So, you know, and we've received quite a few questions about the change in consumer landscape and, you know, the recent pandemic. So I was going to turn it over to each one of the panelists to provide some final remarks on, you know, what do you see the consumer landscape going, maybe some requirements that they might have from a safety standpoint that you're concerned about. Obviously, flexibility is probably going to have to be built into it as well. So let's start with David and provide some final remarks around that.
So done a lot of reading on this and talked to some of my peers in the industry. You know, it seems like the one thing that I think most people can agree on is that the recent pandemic has moved us about 3 to 5 years forward with respects to in the digital space and pick up and delivery to home in particular. So, you know, as we mind you, it did that. I had one peer who said it did that with basically no marketing investment from folks. This was just you know, a demand that came about through these events. So, you know, it's propelled us forward. It's challenged us to move more quickly, as I noted at the beginning of the call. And I think Walmart is we're absolutely up for the challenge. We're responding to customers. We're meeting their needs the way that they want to be met, and we'll continue to do that moving forward.
Great.
I would just say, from us going in the home, it's 2 different industries, furniture and appliances. Appliance, they still want us to go in the home. So it's critical that you have PPE. You got to have gloves, you got to have masks, and you've got to have booties on. And so then you got to present yourself, and then you got to cone off your area. So there's a lot of requirements, extra steps that we've had to take to go into the home to make sure people are comfortable in doing that. On the furniture side, people have more opted to just set it across the threshold. Really don't enter my house, but while you come to the door, you still got to have the PPE on, but just set it across the threshold and I'll take it from there. I know I see a lot more demand on going in the house, people not wanting to do things themselves. So I think once we get past the initial pandemic, there's going to be some basic safety procedures, background checks, temperature checks, various things that we do that's going to help us.
Yeah, and Greg, just maybe my thoughts really briefly, and these are really just what I'm thinking about for the future and the future of research in this particular area. would be certainly, I think we could probably all agree that COVID will accelerate the trends in final mile. I wonder, like, one, will the consumer get more savvy around the trade-offs that we've already started talking about around price and service, which I think I'm hopeful of. And then I would also say, I'm interested in whether if COVID really does drive increased work from home in the future, what does that do to the flexibility of the consumer to receive the products in a different way, specifically maybe from a time window standpoint? So I think those are a couple of things we should keep our eye on.
Great. Well, we're out of time. It looks like David's internet connection went out too. So it was just we got most of him. So that was great. But I appreciate Nick, Brent, and David, if you're still on somewhere. I appreciate you guys joining us today. It was a great conversation, a great discussion. I know the audience was really engaged. We only got through about 10% of the questions that were asked. So hopefully we can find a way to get those audience questions asked after this webinar. But thanks again, and I'll turn it back over to Haniel.